It's a regional problem too. And the UN Secretary General recently said that despite some progress, the HIV/AIDS problem continues to escalate in the world. What do you think should be the immediate priorities, at least here in Southeast Asia?
I think the immediate priority is a refocus on prevention. Because in the past few years, everyone's been talking about treatment. Treatment is easy. It's about putting people in hospitals and giving them the medicines, and then you see some progress. Prevention is much more difficult because you have to deal with all these difficult issues such as, sex and drug use and all that. And we need this regional cooperation because a lot of this involves inter-country issues, migration, workers going from one place to another. And without this sort of cooperation, nothing will happen. It's something that's been talked about at the ASEAN level. There is an ASEAN work plan, but still nothing seems to move. I'm not sure why.
You recently gave a lecture called Fatal Confluences, Islam, Gender, and HIV/AIDS in Malaysia, which links HIV problems to the status of Muslim women. Can you explain?
Well, I didn't mean to say that it is a natural consequence that when you bring Islam, gender, and HIV/AIDS together, the result will definitely be fatal. But I wanted to make the links between the three because there's a lot of people talking about Islam and gender, a lot of people talking about gender and HIV/AIDS, but not many talking about the three together. That we need to look at how people's perceptions of Islam for themselves influences how they behave, particularly for women. For the gender roles that people think come from religion, particularly in relationships with men, because a lot of this really makes women very vulnerable, even in marriage. I mean, a lot of women around the world who are getting infected have only one partner in their lives, and that's their husbands. And yet they're getting infected. And that's really because of the unequal status of men and women in many of our societies, that men are free to do what they want and women aren't. But how do women protect themselves when they are unable to negotiate at all, when the power dynamics are completely unequal, and they are unable to leave marriages which are unsafe because there's nothing, to support them outside. And a lot of this comes from beliefs, about religion. Whether Islam actually says this or not is a different matter. It's how people believe that these interpretations affect them in this way. And that's what I was trying to explore.
In fact, many of your columns deal with Muslim women getting a raw deal in many ways, that they are in fact going backwards. Isn't that a harsh assessment?
It is harsh, it's true, and especially for Malaysia, people thought it was very harsh because Malaysian women are in fact quite advanced. But we are in a situation now where we used to have very good laws for Muslim women in this country, but they have slowly been amended so that the rights have been eroded. In 1984, we had much better rights for Muslim women than we do now. And a lot of it is related to very personal laws which are detrimental to women and, arguably not even Sharia compliant. For instance, women's property which they bring into marriage should always remain theirs. But these laws actually give the husband rights over this property, especially should they divorce. And that's not in the Sharia. So what's happening, that there are a lot of patriarchal notions that come from I don't know where, that is creeping into what is called Sharia laws. And to me, that's an injustice not just to women, but also to Islam, because we're giving Islam a bad name by making it seem unjust. So that's what I was talking about.
Yes, you in fact mentioned again in one of your columns that that's the tragedy of the Islamic world, that even a supposedly modern country like Malaysia, the backward have the upper hand.
Because people are so scared of contradicting them, because they feel that these people are ulama and therefore they must necessarily have more knowledge about Islam. And therefore, who are we to say anything? And that's always the criticism, that if you say anything against these people attack your credentials. Did you go to Al-Azhar? How much knowledge do you have? And not the substance of what you say. And it was the same with my critics. They never actually dealt with what I was saying, more about my credentials. And that's what makes people scared, and they always say, oh, I don't know that much, but why, that sort of thing. And I think that's wrong, because, the first command in Islam is to read, Iqra, right? And so we should all read and we should all learn. And there's nothing to say that this knowledge should be limited or filtered for us by certain people. We all have access to the Quran. We all have access to God, So I don't see why certain people should be given the sole powers to interpret for us, especially if it makes us feel bad. I don't think, Islam was given to us to make us feel miserable. And that seems to be the case with the way these people are interpreting it.
And Malaysia is such a pluralistic society. How does this debate affect people who are not Muslims?
It affects them greatly. It makes them wonder, what is their place in Malaysia? They are citizens. Our constitution guarantees equal rights to every citizen in this country. And yet there are people trying to separate that, said, you have less rights because of your religion, and Muslims have more. And that's not the way this country was founded on. So I think these people have absolute right to question. There are people who are saying they should not question at all anything to do with Islam because it makes Muslims uneasy, which to me is a strange logic. If I have faith in my own religion, I should never be uneasy, and I should welcome questions, because then I can answer, rather than leaving people wondering whether Islam is really such an unjust, unkind religion. And I think it's un-Islamic anyway to be anti-pluralism, because it says in the Quran that God made us of different people so that we will get to know each other. So to me, that means that He intended for us to be diverse.